Sailors, what's the creepiest, scariest, or most unnerving thing you've seen, witnessed while at sea? Giant spears plunging in and out of the sea. Lol. In the Gulf of Alaska, I have seen some shit. But one of the most terror-inspiring things I've seen are what can happen with some of the loose logs from the logging trade. Sometimes when a big log gets loose from a raft, it becomes partially waterlogged and floats small end up. So you have this 4-foot diameter telephone pole in the sea, sticking up 40 feet into the air. No biggie. Shows up on radar, and easy to spot. Now, give that pole 20 years of floating around or so. It rots in such a way that it becomes filed to a point by wind and waves, and looks quite menacing. Now, put it in a gale with 25-foot waves, 50 feet trough to peak. And it becomes a towering spike of death that shoots up from the sea every 15 to 20 minutes, out of nowhere, 60 feet into the air, only to plunge down into the dark depths waiting to skewer some unsuspecting boat in a few minutes when it thrusts out of the ocean again. It is a genuine terrifying sight, rare, but not so rare that I haven't seen two in one season. It's like the spiked dick of Neptune looking for an opportunity to fuck your shit up in a particularly terrifying way. My dad and I were sailing in the Sea of Cortez. It was early morning with some patchy surface fog. I was 14 or 15 at the time. We heard what sounded like applause in the distance, but becoming louder. We could soon see a patch of disturbed water getting closer and closer and hundreds of objects flying out of the water and splashing back down. A few of them flew out, hit the deck of the boat and bounced back into the water. Stingrays. A whole school of them, jumping out of the water for some reason. It was weird and awesome. A mate of mine I was working on a tuna boat with came across an aeroplane emergency life jacket floating in the water about 200 miles out at sea, east coast of New Zealand. One of the main ocean current centers above the east coast of NZ, so could have come from anywhere really. I worked on tugboats for about 6 years. The back deck is considered a wet deck, meaning it isn't unusual for it to be underwater at times. We were making tow with an oil rig at sea with waves that were 14-16 and one hit us just right, taking my co-worker George and pulling him out to sea. Now it's 3 a.m. and pitch black. This is nearly always a death sentence. About 20 seconds later, which felt like an eternity, another wave brought George back on deck, plopping him safely on his ass right next to the winch. George laughed and got right back to work without missing a beat. Not a sailor, however, this was at sea. My dad went boating with some friends down near Rocky Point in Mexico in the mid-90s. They went out late at night to drink. It was incredibly dark apart from the boat lights when suddenly a helicopter flew above their boat and the local who took them out shut everything off immediately. The helicopter hovered over some water in the distance and dumped a few bodies into the water before flying off. When it was out of sight, the local turned everything back on and shrugged it off, saying, "They do that all the time, never seen it so close up before." Ah, the old coke deal gone wrong. Burial at sea, helicopter corpse drop. A couple of years ago I was sailing as a cadet on a merchant vessel and I was scheduled on the evening watch. The rest of the crew was enjoying dinner and I was to call if anything went wrong. We were sailing over open ocean, no land within a day sailing around us, and all of a sudden I notice an island coming up on my boat. It was still far away, but it shouldn't be there. I looked at the maps, checked my position multiple times, and then I noticed the island did not appear on my radars. I called down to the mess room to tell there was a weird island in front of us. The chief mate came up and checked again the maps and positions. He also noticed that the radars did not see the island. We called the captain, and when he came up he started laughing. He was an old sailor with over 40 years of experience under his belt. He explained us it was a Fata Morgana. The real island was more than a day sailing away in the direction we were heading at that moment. After that incident he took over the watch and I went down. It wasn't really creepy but it was strange. Worked the shrimp boats in the Gulf back in the 70s. 100 miles off the coast of Louisiana and the sea got dead calm. I mean dead calm, not a ripple or a swell. The sea was so calm that vibrations from the engine idling would make little ripples in the water. The surface of the sea looked like a huge never-ending mirror extending out in all directions. The visual memory I have of seeing that perfectly flat sea in the moonlight is deeply etched in my memory and I can see it today in my mind just as real as if it was happening now. I could talk about 25-foot seas in the middle of a hurricane, or a half-dozen waterspouts dancing around us during a summer squall, or sargassum seaweed as far as the eye could see so thick around the boat that you could walk on it, or flying fish all taking flight at the same time like a flock of birds skimming across the water. But none of that stuff had the impact on me like the dead calm of the sea 100 miles offshore. When I was about 19, maybe 20, my mom's boyfriend at the time decided to take us out on his boat one afternoon so that we could lounge around and swim in the ocean far from the shore. We were super excited because the water was turquoise, completely see-through and the perfect temperature that day. So we found what seemed to be the perfect location, dropped the anchor and had a snack. Before long, we were completely surrounded by hundreds of giant milky white jellyfish. There were so many that we couldn't see clear water anywhere around us. Their bells were easily 5 feet in diameter, if not more. We did not swim that day. I've been hit in the face by a flying fish at night. Was not nice. Hey, me too. Crossing from Los Angeles to Catalina at around 3 a.m., mid-channel with absolutely nothing in sight, and one smacked me right in the face. I got a black eye from the little bastard. Had it not been flopping around the bottom of the cockpit I never would have figured it out. I picked it up and tossed it back in the ocean, but I did give it a very pointed glare. Not a sailor, but a marine on a ship. We were cruising through the Pacific when we received an SOS from a boat. From what I heard, he was trying to cross the ocean by himself. Took a few days to find him. I remember watching off the side of the ship. The sails were imprinted with the Chinese flag. A small team was sent to board the small sailboat. But when they arrived no one was on board. We searched for a body for the following days but found nothing. Still don't know what happened to him. I'm not a sailor but my family owns a boat and I frequently go out on fishing trips in the sea with my dad. It's usually more us talking about life with him doing most of the fishing. Well, on one trip, we were out about I think 10 miles from the beach. My dad was telling me about how he got into and won a bar fight and I was just silently listening when a weird whistling, howling sound sort of surrounded us. I can't really describe it. It was like a cross between a whale and the sound of someone blowing air over an open bottle. My dad looked pretty calm but I could tell he was freaked out too. It went on for about another minute, slowly becoming stronger, until it just abruptly ended with a screech from somewhere in the water. We never talk about it and I still wonder what was making the sound. On a Navy ship, we were out on patrol and took a massive lightning bolt to the aft mast at the same time as the wind picked up significantly. We started listing quite heavily and the thunder made it sound like we hit something. Most of us got really fired up and immediately ran below the waterline to do damage assessment. One guy ran to the bridge to check out what had happened. Luckily it was only lightning and not something we'd hit, but it really felt like we had. Apart from fire alarms I've never been so ready to do damage control in my life. It isn't all that weird I guess. When I was in the Navy we ran into the second largest pod of dolphins in the world. This was in the Western Pacific. Anyway, they were a fun-loving bunch and like many fish, followed us because we dumped food over the side while underway. As we sailed, The dolphins formed a line on our port side and would take turns diving under the prow, then the line would make its way aft along the starboard around and repeat. They did this for a couple of hours before breaking off and going wherever they go. Sorta like a conga line. A few of us were TD'd white to the USNS LAKEY for 10 days, where we saw the most amazing school of flying fish. They would swim alongside and dozens at a time would come out of the water and fly along. It was one of the most spectacular natural things I've ever witnessed. I wish I had had the history of that ship when I was on her. The LAKEY was from World War II and had survived being hit by the kamikazes. Typhoons were the scariest part. We had to sail through two during monsoon season. It was a good-sized ship, 300 feet long with 15 feet of freeboard and 4 decks above the weather deck. They tied off lines on the main deck so the engineering section could get their soundings from the ports and the deck. This told them how much water was in the bilges and the holds. These were maybe 3 inches holes with the cap, and a weighted line was dropped. The boys had to clip onto the line for safety as the swells were 30-40 feet. You could get your face washed standing on the flying bridge. That's 50 feet above the sea. We would rise on the wave peaks and you could see the world, then we would fall into the troughs and all you could see was ocean above you, way above. We sat literally in a bowl of water and that is all you could see. It was pretty much agreed on the realization of how puny and powerless we truly are in face of nature. I know dolphins are mammals. USS Haleakala, AE 25. I was pulling a small sailboat mast from the bottom of a lake during a storm. Waves had turtled the boat. So I was about 10 feet down and pulling the mast up, and the weight of it pushed me down, so I was basically standing at the bottom of the lake and could see the waves up top. It was an overall weird / frightening / stimulating experience. And then something big swam past me and brushed my leg, must have been at least 3 feet long. I eventually got the boat turned back over and the mast on board and we got towed in. As we hit land I laid down on the beach and decided I wasn't going to go in the water for a couple days. I hate swimming in lakes and the ocean because I don't want to share my swimming space with big, slimy creatures. I'm scared of deep, dark water to the point where even encountering it in video games gives me anxiety.
Make sure to like and subscribe for more stories.